Narayanan, who is the Head of Business Strategy with Elait IT Technology Services Private Limited. He brings more than 3 decades of experience across multiple domains. He is ideated, conceptualized, strategized numerous businesses, go-to-market initiatives during his career. Having handled P&L responsibilities during a large part of his professional calling, he is known for delivering consistent fiscal and operational discipline to ensure corporate performance and profitability. His excellence, program and people management skill have consistently ensured sustainable long-term association to achieve exceptional business performance. Can we welcome Rajeev with big round of applause, please?
Thank you, everybody. Good afternoon. Time for lunch. I'll try and make it short and sweet. So this is the company that I represent, Elait, and the topic that I'm going to talk about today is on avoid data analytics dysfunctionality and adopt excellence in data governance. I'm actually focusing on slightly different line of thought, unlike the deeply technical stuff that you guys have heard about all through the day so far. And I will be looking at the operational and functional gaps that most organizations actually fall into. Okay, so that's what it is going to be. And why is it that I'm looking at this particular, functional and operational side of the stuff? It's because we, as a company, been in existence for 14 years, servicing very large customers across the globe, Fortune 100, 500, across all domains. But interestingly, there's one thing that we have seen happening. Companies that have implemented the best of solutions over perhaps 5-6 years, they regress, and then they fall into a trap, so to speak, and then the problems start to happening. So where does it all start, and why does it start? Okay, that's going to be the topic. So let me go ahead. So this is what we are. We exclusively focus on the data management domain, offices across the globe, and these are some representative clients that we have across the globe, spanning right from gaming to media to whatever, whatnot. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to establish here is one concept which I call as fractures. Okay, now what are these fractures? Fractures are gaps that every organization will see across intent of managing business content, which is data. Okay, so now principally 2 layers, the analytical layer and the governance layer, because the governance layer actually forms the bedrock that supports whatever a business user would like to have from an analytical perspective. These are statistics that you've already seen across a lot of presentations, so I'm not actually going to read them. But then, if you actually go one step behind, the evidences that point to fractures in organizations that manage data governance, which leads to gaps in data analytics, you will find it manifested in multiple areas. Now, one could be difficulty in collecting meaningful data, data security, revenue leaks, reputational damage, which could be compliance related, whatever it may be, whichever sector it may be, and compromising data quality. There could be many, many more, okay? Evidences are clearly made available across multiple sources of information and analytical companies like a Gartner and McKinsey's and so on and so forth. Just to take something, most of them are repeated. If you actually see the 60 to 73% of data in an organization is never used for any strategic purpose, you heard all of this. But then, if you categorize it, you can actually put them into buckets, which start to correlate and give you some information. So I call this as evidences of fractures. Okay. Now fractures could be of many kinds across the organization, across the data journey. Okay. Now, right from authoring data, creating data, to the engineering part, integrating data, analyzing the data, and then reading the story out of the data that people call as visualization. Across the entire spectrum, you will find fractures. So what we have actually noticed is most of the organizations, most of them, we have had instances where customers have called us after 7-8 years of implementation, when there could be multiple reasons. They have grown inorganically, they've acquired some other new company, or they've had a change of people across important functions that actually man the entire functions that make up the data journey. But then there are fractures. It's important to understand there are fractures that are there. And it's also important for you to understand how to recognize those fractures, and if that has got to happen, you have to try and list them down. Not only for your organization as it happens, but you may want to actually read up instances of fractures from different companies and note it down, especially so because this could happen to you. It doesn't matter, the sector doesn't matter. I've just given representative set of fractures here. Business fractures, data architecture, platform quality, it manifests in different ways, so it's difficult to actually put a finger on the pie and tell that, hey, this is definitely going to be my fracture. There could be a set of them. Data governance fractures, metrics fractures, many of them. But it is, the first lesson is to accept and try and list down the fractures that make up or create gaps in your data journey. So that's the first thing. So I'm not going to read out everything, but it is very, very important to recognize this. This is the fracture part of the story. Out of these set of fractures, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take 2 fractures and then let's deep dive into it, because there are many fractures, it will take a lot of time. So I'll take 2 of them. Okay? The first fracture that I'm going to take is the organizational fracture. Okay? Now before I actually go into the organizational fracture that actually make up the data governance part of the story, if you Google anytime, you will find an organizational structure which is pyramidal. Okay? Now, if you deep dive into finding out the representation a pyramidal organization would actually give in the success of making an eventful, manageable data governance program, it's quite limited. So one of the things that we have noticed across our customers, across ages, is that one of the principal operational functional fracture is an organizational structure or lack of it that can support good data governance. So we'll see that the first one, okay? Yeah. Now this is how Elait would actually look at representing an organizational structure. Principally, you have an operational layer, you have a tactical competency layer, then you have the business proficiency layer, you have the strategic layer, and you have the middle layer, the executive sponsors that actually would chart the progress of the company, be it an acquisition, be it next year's norms in terms of business KPIs, etc., etc. This guy, or the set of guys that make up this, creates a sense of direction from a business perspective. He doesn't actually deep dive to find out what needs to be done, what needs to be monitored to get his objectives clear. He pushes down the entire thing to what I call the strategic layer. Now, typically, if you look at most of the organizations, we'll have strategic layer of steering and DG council into one. But I recommend that you split it into 2. Why? Because for me, DG council guys are more strategic. They're more geeks, but steering committee guys are operational, administrative. Whatever these guys do, someone needs to push it down the organization. And I bet if it is one set of people, it's never going to happen in your organization. And we have seen that as a fracture. You have to separate out the 2. Then you have the business proficiency layer. I'm not actually reading this stuff. I mean, you can quickly, take, click snaps or whatever. So now the business proficiency layer, you have information technologists, you have compliance experts, audit and legal, data taxonomy experts. This is something new that I've actually put because this is some new trend that is actually coming in. It's already there, but it is becoming more and more prevalent now, in the context of ontology paths and stuff like that, But then, one of the things that we have noticed, especially in companies abroad, is that this layer comprises of people who are contracted. So they move around the organization and they lose a lot of information. So that's a set of fractures that you have. And you have the tactical guys who just do the bidding of whatever these guys actually do, sense of direction passed on by the strategic guys from a steering committee member, and then you have the operational guy, the front desk guys. If you look at incidences, analyze the incidences that actually happen within your organization, you will actually find that most of the problem here is, there aren't problems at that level which leads to fractures. It actually starts from this level, the business proficiency level and the strategic level, okay? There are reasons for that, because organization, policies change, people change and many others. But then it is good to be aware that 90% of your problems start at this level, wherein you will start to get organizational fractures. It manifests in different ways, but whatever we have analyzed with our customer base actually points to something like this. Now let me take the next layer, okay? This is the second instance. This is what I call as a techno-functional layer. Understanding what are the categories, the subcategories that actually make up data governance, okay? Very quickly, I've just put whatever are the principal stuff that actually make up data governance. But importantly, what is needed to understand in this context is that most organizations that are successful have people who understand the interdependencies between these categories as well as the intradependencies. They also value the people who actually man this, because the moment people change, you'll find open invitation to fissures and fractures manifesting itself. But it is important in your organization to have some set of people that will actually have clear idea about the intra and interdependencies across these categories. I'm just, I was intrigued when I had actually met one of our customers from the insurance side. So he had actually told that, hey, where do I start? What do I focus on? Because every area, has a lot of, core dependencies across. It's not isolated. Each step in the journey is not isolated. So where do I focus on? While everything is important, you'll find if you really go deep into the entire thing, at least around 50 to 60% of your problems lies operationally and functionally emanating from the data governance side. Why? Because there are multiple categories and each category has its own specialization. Okay, so that is where the focus should be, and I still repeat that is going to be the bedrock of success. If you have great governance, with even perhaps not so good architecture, you can still pull off a miracle. But then if you have very bad governance, great architecture and platforms, that's a recipe for failure. So this is what it is. Data governance focus should actually be, given due importance as much as what the other sectors of the journey would also be given. Now, what are the possibilities in fulcrums? One of the things that we've noticed when we have actually met customers is that, hey, data governance, you mentioned that it's got so many sectors. So where do I actually focus on? So then, what we did was, we sort of developed an assessment program as the first step to engage with a potential client, because he doesn't know where to focus on. And then what we did, was that, okay, this is representative. Before I actually go into this, I'll actually talk about the solution. And therefore, after the assessment, we should be able to give the customer an immediate peek into the focus areas across the sectors that make up the data governance cycle. Okay, so that's what we did. Okay, and then he picks and chooses one or two of them to focus his priorities on. Okay, we'll see that. We'll see how that happens. Okay, now this is the assessment category. We have this. Working outside, we have a booth there. You can just drop in. Okay, and each of them have a series of questions which actually represent, what could determine the status of current organization's maturity across 5 levels. The result of which is something like this, okay? For each category, you get a, it scores itself to a percentage which actually denotes the maturity level, and it gives you, okay, if it is 30%, why are you on 30%? And then it gives you, a relative indicator on where to actually focus on. We have seen this working because most often organizations call us with representative problems that are manifested already, which the origin of which is not very clear. So this, we almost always say that, hey, this could be a starting point for you to start your focus. And then, just for detail, this is how, I've just taken a sample for metadata management, for whatever the categories are. We have sort of listed what, the report would actually say in the context of its maturity cycle, like uninformed, rudimentary, fragmented enterprise and strategic, where they stand and why they stand there and what they need to do to progress further. Okay, so this is the kind of report that you will get for each of the categories that make up metadata management or other categories. Cool, so after all this is when we recommend that people sit down and then put their goals and quantifications across whatever the implementation program that they would have for adoption of a better data management program. And there again, you can quantify, sit across for user acceptance, for the business value. Importantly, we have heard about the need to have KPAs and KPIs. So derive your KPIs and then come about with a set of principles that will be part of your implementation. So this is the set of slides that I had. I have several case studies that follow. I've just taken one of them, a leading bank in Europe. They had a lot of problems, a lot of security leaks, a lot of, they knew that they had lineage problems, that problem, this problem. So we used, some, as a similar assessment methodology to try and focus, what they should do first and prioritize, etc., etc. So then, I'm not reading out the entire thing. I think time is the essence, and I'm almost through. So maybe if there is time, I can take a couple of questions, and then I don't know, the organizers also. I've got time. I'm open to questions. We got a booth out, so you may want to just drop in, and we could have discussions as well.
Thank you, dear. Thank you for your time and presentation. We'll take one quick question before we move to the panel discussion. Do we have questions for Rajeev? One quick question.
Thank you so much for the great presentation. In terms of the data lineage and the regulatory changes, governance plays a very important role. When it comes from strategic and tactical, how do you really see that when the regulatory changes are happening, the cascading effects of those are being appropriately tracked onto? And at the same time, is there a possibility that the impact management can be really sensitized based on current environment versus the futuristic environment?
See, that's an important point. So now, what are you actually talking? You're actually talking the possibility of a fracture coming in place, right? So I would actually put that entire thing from an organizational perspective. You have technical perspectives to do it, but if there is not an organizational, awareness of this particular change, it's never going to be propagated, okay? Irrespective of you having the best of people, irrespective of you having the best of solutions available that will actually implement them, okay? Because I'm primarily looking at it from a functional operational perspective, but I'm not discounting the other part of the story, okay? But if it has to happen, it has to have an organizational will, at the first place. So I would actually say that you have the best of guys doing compliance and regulatory monitoring and all that particular thing within the organization and externally, but then it should actually be propagated by the steering committee to the other stuff. implementation will happen, but if this is lacking, nothing is going to happen. So, because that's a fracture that happens in most of the organizations, like these guys might be aware, they might not actually communicate well enough with me to actually have the propagation and the compliance done. So I would answer it that way. Technology, everything is very important, platforms and stuff.
This is something that I would like to honestly discuss, because most
Sure.
of the time I have seen this as a bandaging. People don't fix it.
Yes.
But it's always a bandage versus a bandage versus a bandage.
Oh,
so
yes.
it gets onto a cascading effect, and
Right.
suddenly we realize that we are into a security breach or something which could have been fixed right at the
Beginning.
forefront.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
definitely a food for thought, but thank you for
Absolutely.
the insights.
Thank you. Thank you.